Welcome to Curiosity, the podcast where science meets wonder. Join us as we explore the fascinating, the innovative, and the unexpected, from the secrets of the cosmos to the marvels of everyday life. Each episode takes you on a journey to uncover the knowledge and stories that fuel our endless quest for understanding. Let your curiosity guide you.
Wrapped in eternity, unraveling the secrets of mummies and mummification. Mummies have fascinated humanity for centuries, capturing our imagination with their eerie preservation and the secrets they hold about ancient cultures. The process of mummification, whether natural or intentional, is a complex interplay of science, ritual, and environmental conditions that has allowed us to peer into the past. From the arid deserts of Egypt to the icy peaks of the Andes, mummies have been discovered across the globe, each telling a unique story of life, death, and the beliefs that guided their preservation. To understand mummies fully, we must explore the intricate details of how they are created, the cultural significance behind the practice, and the remarkable diversity of mummification methods employed by different civilizations throughout history. The most iconic mummies, of course, come from ancient Egypt, where mummification was elevated to an art form steeped in religious tradition. The Egyptians believed that the body needed to be preserved after death to ensure the soul's survival in the afterlife. This belief stemmed from their complex mythology, where the god Osiris, ruler of the underworld, was himself a mummified deity, resurrected after being dismembered. For the Egyptians, death was not an end but a transition, and the physical body served as a vessel that the soul, or Ka, could return to. To achieve this preservation, they developed a meticulous process that took approximately 70 days to complete, involving skilled embalmers who were often priests trained in both anatomy and ritual. The Egyptian mummification process began with the removal of the internal organs, which were prone to rapid decay. Embalmers would make an incision along the left side of the abdomen and extract the stomach, intestines, liver, and lungs. These organs were not discarded but carefully preserved in a solution of natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate, before being placed in canopic jars, each protected by one of the four sons of Horus. The heart, considered the seat of intelligence and emotion, was typically left in place, as it was believed to be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, in the afterlife judgment. The brain, curiously, was not valued in the same way. It was removed through the nostrils using a hooked tool and discarded, as the Egyptians did not recognize its significance. Once the organs were dealt with, the body was thoroughly dried out, a critical step to halt decomposition. Natron was again the key agent, applied both inside and outside the body in generous quantities. The corpse would be packed with natron and left to desiccate for about 40 days, during which time the salt absorbed moisture, leaving the skin leathery and the body shrunken but intact. After this drying period, the natron was removed, and the embalmers would wash the body, often with palm wine, which had antiseptic properties, and then anoint it with fragrant oils like myrrh and frankincense. These substances not only masked the smell of decay but also held spiritual significance, symbolizing purification and divine favor. The body was then wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen strips, a process that could take weeks. Amulets and prayers inscribed on papyrus were tucked between the layers to protect the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. Finally, a mask, often idealized to reflect the deceased's youthful visage, was placed over the face, completing the transformation into a mummy ready for burial. This elaborate process did not emerge fully formed. In Egypt's pre-dynastic period, before 3100 BCE, bodies were naturally preserved by the hot, dry sand of shallow desert graves. Over time, as burial practices evolved and tombs became more elaborate, the Egyptians noticed that bodies decayed faster in these enclosed spaces, prompting the development of artificial mummification. By the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE, the technique was being refined, initially for pharaohs and nobility. It reached its peak during the New Kingdom, from 1570 to 1075 BCE, when even the wealthy could afford some form of mummification, though the quality varied with cost. The poorest citizens still relied on the desert's natural drying, but the cultural obsession with preservation permeated all levels of society. While Egyptian mummification is the most famous, it is far from the only example. In South America, the Chinchorro people of what is now Chile and Peru practiced mummification thousands of years before the Egyptians, beginning as early as 5000 BCE. Unlike the Egyptians, who reserved the practice for elites, the Chinchorro mummified everyone: men, women, children, even fetuses, suggesting a more egalitarian approach to death. Their method was strikingly different, involving a kind of reconstructive preservation. The body was first skinned, and the flesh and organs were removed. The skeleton was then reinforced with sticks and reeds, and the skin was reattached, sometimes supplemented with animal hide if it had deteriorated. The face was rebuilt with clay, molded into a lifelike expression, and the mummy was painted with black manganese or red ochre, depending on the time period. This labor-intensive process reflects a deep reverence for the dead, though the exact spiritual motivations remain a mystery, as the Chinchorro left no written records. Their mummies, some of the oldest deliberately preserved in the world, predate Egypt's by millennia, showing that the impulse to defy decay is an ancient and widespread human trait. Natural mummification, by contrast, occurs without human intervention, relying instead on environmental conditions to preserve the body. The bog bodies of northern Europe offer a haunting example. Found in peat bogs across Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom, these mummies date back to the Iron Age, some as old as 2,000 years. The acidic, oxygen-poor environment of the bogs inhibits bacterial growth, effectively pickling the bodies. Skin and hair often remain intact, darkened to a deep brown by tannins in the peat, while bones sometimes dissolve due to the acidity. Many bog bodies bear signs of violent death, strangulation, stabbing, or blunt trauma, leading some scholars to speculate they were victims of ritual sacrifice, perhaps offerings to appease gods or ensure fertile harvests. The preservation is so remarkable that details like fingerprints and stomach contents can still be analyzed, providing a snapshot of their final moments. One famous example, Tolland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950, still had a serene expression and a leather noose around his neck, suggesting a ceremonial execution. Another striking case of natural mummification comes from the Andes Mountains, where the Incas left behind the so-called ice mummies. These children, sacrificed in rituals known as capacocha, were buried high in the peaks, where freezing temperatures and dry air naturally preserved their bodies. One famous example, dubbed La Doncella, or the Maiden, was discovered in 1999 near the summit of Mount Uyayaca in Argentina. She was about 15 years old at the time of her death, likely 500 years ago, and her body was so well preserved that her skin, hair, and even internal organs remained intact. She was found seated, wrapped in textiles, with offerings of pottery and food beside her. Studies revealed she had been given coca leaves and alcohol before her death, possibly to sedate her for the ritual. The cold, arid conditions of the high altitude froze her body almost immediately, preventing decay and turning her into a time capsule of Incan culture. Her preservation offers insight into Incan cosmology, where mountains were sacred, and child sacrifices were seen as messengers to the gods. In Asia, mummification took on yet another form with the Buddhist monks of Japan who practiced self-mummification, a process known as sokushinbutsu. This rare and extreme practice, carried out between the 11th and 19th centuries, involved monks intentionally preparing their bodies for preservation while still alive. The process spanned years, beginning with a strict diet of nuts, seeds, and berries to eliminate body fat, followed by consuming bark and roots to toughen the skin. In the final stage, the monk would drink a toxic tea made from the sap of the urushi tree, which caused vomiting and dehydration while also poisoning the body to deter insects after death. The monk would then meditate in a small stone tomb until death, ringing a bell daily to signal he was still alive. When the bell stopped, the tomb was sealed. After several years, the body was exhumed. If successfully mummified, it was displayed as a symbol of enlightenment. Only a handful of these mummies survive today. Their gaunt, meditative forms a testament to ascetic devotion. The practice was eventually banned in Japan, but it remains a chilling example of how far some would go to achieve a lasting spiritual legacy. The science behind mummification, whether artificial or natural, hinges on one principle: stopping decay. Bacteria and fungi thrive in warm, moist environments, breaking down organic tissue. Mummification counters this by removing moisture, through desiccation with salt, freezing, or submersion in anaerobic bogs, or by altering the body's chemistry to make it inhospitable to microbes. In Egypt, natron's dehydrating power was key, while in bogs, the lack of oxygen starved bacteria. The Incan mummies relied on sub-zero temperatures, and the chinchorro's removal of flesh preempted rot altogether. Each method reflects an ingenious adaptation to local conditions and resources, revealing human ingenuity in the face of mortality. The preservation is not perfect. Over centuries, some mummies deteriorate despite the initial efforts, but the best examples have lasted millennia, defying the natural order. Beyond the mechanics, mummies carry profound cultural weight. In Egypt, they were a bridge to eternity, equipped with goods and spells for the afterlife. For the chinchorro, they may have honored the dead as enduring members of the community. Bog bodies hint at sacrificial rites, while Incan mummies embodied a pact between the living and the divine. The Sokushin Butsu monks turned mummification into a spiritual quest, their bodies a testament to transcendence. These practices show how deeply humans have sought to defy death, whether through preservation, remembrance, or transformation. The materials used in mummification also varied widely, reflecting both practicality and symbolism. Egyptians favored natron and resins, while the chinchorro used clay and pigments. The Incas relied on textiles and the elements, and the Japanese monks used dietary restriction and toxins. Each choice was shaped by what was available and what held meaning within the culture. The evolution of mummification reflects changing societies. In Egypt, the practice declined during the Roman period after 30 BCE, as Christianity and other beliefs displaced traditional religion. The chinchorro eventually abandoned their complex methods, possibly due to cultural shifts or environmental changes. The Incan practice ended with Spanish colonization in the 16th century, and Sokushin Butsu faded as Buddhism modernized. Yet the legacy of mummification endures, not just in the bodies themselves but in what they teach us. Modern science has transformed our understanding of these remains. X-rays, used on mummies since the early 20th century, gave way to CT scans, allowing detailed 3D reconstructions without unwrapping. DNA analysis has traced lineage and disease, while chemical tests identify embalming substances. The 3,500-year-old papyrus Louvre Carlsberg, discovered in 2021, revealed a rare manual on embalming faces, showing how advanced Egyptian knowledge was even then. Today, mummies continue to captivate us, not just as relics but as windows into ancient lives. The Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun's mummy, discovered in 1922, yielded clues about his health and cause of death, a possible chariot accident or infection. Bog bodies have preserved pollen grains, hinting at the season of their demise. The Ice Maiden's coca leaves speak to Incan rituals. Each mummy is a story, painstakingly preserved by nature or human hands, waiting to be told. Scholars debate the ethics of studying and displaying them. Some argue it disrespects the dead, while others see it as a celebration of their legacy. Museums worldwide house thousands of mummies, from the British Museum's extensive collection to the mummies of Guanajuato in Mexico, accidentally preserved by dry crypt conditions in the 19th century. Mummification, in all its forms, is a testament to humanity's complex relationship with death. It blends science and spirituality, practicality, and reverence, creating something that endures long after life fades. From the sun-scorched sands of Egypt to the windswept peaks of the Andes, mummies remind us of our shared past, our fears, our hopes, and our relentless drive to leave a mark on eternity. They are not just bodies, they are echoes of civilizations, whispering across millennia about what it means to be human.